June 14th, 1955, 9:47 p.m. Albert Anastasia's estate in New Jersey. The most feared man in the American mafia stood in his study, holding a telephone receiver so tightly his knuckles were white. Behind him, through the window, you could see his estate. Acres of manicured lawns, armed guards patrolling, a fortress built on decades of murder and intimidation. Albert, the Lord High Executioner, Anastasia, head of Murder, Inc., the man who personally ordered over 500 hits, the man who killed people with his own hands when he felt like it, the man every mobster in America feared. Right now, he was terrified. "I want to speak to my nephews," he said into the phone. His voice was controlled, tight, barely containing rage that was rapidly turning into something else, something he hadn't felt in 30 years. Fear. On the other end of the line, Bumpy Johnson's voice was calm, patient, almost friendly. "They're safe, Mr. Anastasia. Comfortable even. Well-fed. Nobody's laid a hand on them. But whether they stay that way depends on what happens in the next few minutes." Behind Anastasia, a noose hung on the wall, a gift from someone years ago, a joke about his nickname, the Lord High Executioner, the man who decided who lived and who died in the American underworld. Now he was the one being executed, psychologically, systematically, and he couldn't do anything about it. "What do you want?" The question came out almost like a whisper. "Now we can talk business," Bumpy said. "This is the story of how one kidnapping led to three, how the most dangerous man in the mafia got outplayed by a Harlem gangster he thought he could intimidate, and how, in 48 hours, Albert Anastasia learned that there are different kinds of power, the kind you take through violence and the kind you earn through intelligence. By the time that phone call ended, Anastasia would be begging, and the balance of power between the Italian mafia and Harlem would change forever. But before I show you exactly how Bumpy Johnson outplayed the Lord High Executioner, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now. I'm bringing you the real stories of strategic genius in organized crime, the psychological warfare that beat violence, the intelligence that changed history, and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching this from? New York, where this happened? London, Tokyo, São Paulo, Sydney. I want to know how far these stories of strategic brilliance are reaching. Now let me take you back 48 hours earlier, to the moment Albert Anastasia made the biggest mistake of his criminal career. Albert Anastasia wasn't just another mob boss. He was a legend of violence, a man whose reputation was built on hundreds of corpses. Born in Italy in 1902, came to America in 1919. By 1930, he was already known as one of the most effective killers in New York. In the 1930s and 40s, he ran Murder, Inc., a group of professional killers who performed hits for the mob. It wasn't personal, it was business. Cold, professional, efficient murder. Anastasia didn't just order hits. He participated, enjoyed it even. There are stories of him personally strangling people who'd crossed him, of him shooting men in the face just to make a point, of him torturing informants for hours before killing them. By 1955, he effectively controlled what would become the Gambino crime family. He had over 300 made men, hundreds more associates. He moved millions of dollars through gambling, loan sharking, labor racketeering, and drug trafficking. When Albert Anastasia wanted something, he took it. When someone said no, he killed them. Simple, effective, terrifying. Nobody said no to Albert Anastasia and lived to talk about it. Except Albert Anastasia had never dealt with Bumpy Johnson before. June 12, 1955. 2:30 p.m., a street corner in Harlem, 125th Street and Lenox Avenue. Marcus "Smooth" Henderson was 28 years old. He ran heroin distribution for Bumpy Johnson's operation. Smart kid, reliable, moved about $50,000 worth of product every week, trusted by the community because he kept violence out of the streets, didn't sell to kids, ran a professional operation. Smooth was talking to one of his dealers, making the weekly rounds, when a black Cadillac pulled up. 4 men got out, Italian, well-dressed, professional. Smooth recognized what he was seeing immediately, but by the time he tried to move, it was too late. They grabbed him in broad daylight, threw him in the car, One of them flashed a badge, fake NYPD credentials. Any witnesses would think it was a police arrest. The Cadillac was gone in 15 seconds. By 3 p.m., Smooth was in a warehouse on the Brooklyn docks, tied to a chair, not beaten, not tortured, just held. At 4 p.m., an intermediary knocked on Bumpy Johnson's door. A low-level Italian guy, nervous, clearly just delivering a message he didn't fully understand. Albert Anastasia has your man, the intermediary said. He wants 40% of Harlem's heroin trade. Smooth walks free when you agree. You got 48 hours to decide. Then he left. The message was clear. The Lord High Executioner had decided to expand his drug empire. Harlem was lucrative. Bumpy Johnson was just another black gangster. Anastasia had done this dozens of times before. Identify target, take what you want, make people comply through fear. It had always worked before. Here's what Anastasia didn't understand. He was playing by mafia rules, rules that said the man with the most soldiers wins. The man who's willing to kill the most people gets respect. But Bumpy Johnson didn't play by those rules. And Albert Anastasia was about to get an education that would cost him everything. 8 p.m., June 12, 1955, Bumpy Johnson's apartment in Harlem. 8 men sat around his living room. These were his core crew, men who'd been with him for years, men who'd killed for him, who'd take bullets for him. They were expecting orders to go to war. We hit them tonight, Chess Monroe said. Find out where they're holding Smooth. Go in heavy. Get him back. Big Frank Lucas nodded. Anastasia's got maybe 15 guys at his Brooklyn operations. We can mobilize 40. Kill every one of them, Jack Monk Wilson added. Send the message you don't touch Harlem's people. Bumpy sat in his chair, quiet, thinking. He'd been thinking for the past 4 hours since the message came. Everyone waited. When Bumpy was quiet like this, it meant he was planning something. Finally, he spoke. No. The room went silent. No. Chess looked confused. Bumpy, they took Smooth. They're demanding 40%. We gotta respond. We will respond, Bumpy said, but not the way they expect, not the way they want. He stood up, walked to the window, looked out at Harlem. See, Anastasia thinks this is simple. He's got more soldiers than us. He's killed more people. He's got the 5 families behind him, so he thinks he can just take what he wants. Bumpy turned back to his crew. But he made a mistake. He thinks this is about violence, about who's willing to kill more. And if that's the game, maybe he wins. Maybe we get Smooth back. Maybe we don't. Either way, we lose men. We start a war we can't win. So what do? Frank asked. We hit him where it hurts more than any bullet. Chess started to smile. He understood. Family, Chess said. Bumpy nodded. Italians, everything is about family. Blood is sacred. You can kill a man's soldiers. He replaces them. You can take his money, he makes more. But you touch his family? That's different. That's psychological. He looked around the room. Anastasia has nephews. 3 of them. Young guys. Early 20s. He's grooming them to take over eventually. Shows them off at restaurants. Takes them to meetings. He's proud of them. Where are they? Monk asked. That's what we're going to find out. And then we're going to take them. All 3. At the same time. The room erupted, everyone talking at once. The audacity of it. The danger. The potential. Bumpy held up his hand. Silence fell. This isn't about hurting kids. We're not Anastasia. We're not animals. The nephews will be treated with respect. Fed well, kept comfortable. No violence unless absolutely necessary. Then what's the point? Someone asked. The point is psychological warfare. Anastasia thinks he's untouchable, thinks his family is safe because of who he is. We're going to show him he's wrong. We're going to make him feel what we feel, helpless. And then we're going to make him call me, make him beg. Chess was already pulling out papers, lists of names, intelligence they'd gathered over the years on the 5 families. Vincent Anastasia, Chess read, 24, law student at Columbia, lives in a small apartment near campus. Minimal security. Anthony Anastasia, 26, works in the family's legitimate businesses. shipping mostly, lives in Queens with a girlfriend, drives himself everywhere. Joseph Anastasia, 22, playboy, dropped out of college, spends his nights at clubs in Manhattan, usually drunk by midnight. Bumpy nodded. 3 targets, 3 teams. We move tonight. By sunrise, we have all 3, and then we wait for Anastasia to realize what happened. And then, Frank asked, then we teach the Lord High Executioner what real fear feels like. Within 6 hours, Bumpy would have 3 of Anastasia's nephews, and the most dangerous man in America would learn that violence isn't the only form of power. June 12th, 9 p.m. to midnight. Intelligence gathering. Bumpy didn't move without information. Never had. While other gangsters relied on guns and numbers, Bumpy relied on knowing more than everyone else. His network activated. Bartenders who served the Italian families, dock workers who saw the nephews around legitimate businesses, college students at Columbia who knew Vincent, doormen at buildings where the family did business. Information flowed back. Addresses, schedules, patterns, security details. The beautiful thing about Albert Anastasia's pride was that it made his family vulnerable. He wanted people to see his nephews, wanted them to be visible in legitimate society, wanted them to represent the family's power and success. So they weren't hidden like capos running illegal operations. They lived openly, publicly, like civilians. That made them reachable. By 11:01 p.m., Bumpy had what he needed. 15 of his best men were divided into 3 teams of 5. Each team had a target. Vincent Anastasia, the law student, the smart one. He was in the Columbia Law Library studying for finals. Stayed late most nights. Usually left around 1 a.m. Walked 3 blocks to his apartment alone. Tonight he'd have company. Anthony Anastasia, the legitimate one. He was at his girlfriend's apartment in Queens. Quiet neighborhood, normally left around midnight to drive home. Dependable, predictable. Tonight his routine would be interrupted. Joseph Anastasia, the playboy, he was at a nightclub in Midtown Manhattan. Already drunk, dancing with various women, would stumble out around 2 a.m., try to find his car, probably need help walking. Tonight he'd get help, just not the kind he expected. June 13th, 2 a.m., 3 locations simultaneously. Vincent. He walked out of the library, textbooks under his arm, tired, focused on constitutional law. Didn't notice the car until it pulled up beside him. Vincent Anastasia? A man stepped out. Professional, calm. Who's asking? Someone who needs to talk to your uncle. Get in the car. Nobody needs to get hurt. Vincent looked around. 2 more men, all armed, all professional. This wasn't a robbery. This was organized. You know who my uncle is? Vincent asked, trying to sound brave. We know exactly who he is. That's why you're coming with us. Move. Vincent got in the car. They were gone in 30 seconds. Anthony. He kissed his girlfriend goodnight, walked to his car in the parking lot, reached for his keys. A voice behind him. Anthony, don't turn around, don't reach for anything. Just walk to the black sedan and get in. Do you have any idea who? We know exactly who you are. That's why we're here. Move. Your girlfriend stays safe as long as you cooperate. Anthony got in the car. They drove away. Joseph. He stumbled out of the nightclub at 2:15 a.m., drunk, looking for his car. Couldn't remember where he parked. 2 men approached. Mr. Anastasia, we can help you find your car. Finally, some service, Joseph slurred. You know who I am? We know exactly who you are. They walked him to a different car. By the time Joseph realized something was wrong, they were already in Harlem, and he was too drunk to do anything about it. By 3 a.m., all 3 nephews were secured in a safe house in Harlem. 3 different locations for safety. Professional guards, comfortable accommodations, no violence, no threats, just detention. And as the sun rose over New York City on June 13th, Albert Anastasia would wake up to discover that the rules had changed. 7 a.m. Albert Anastasia's phone started ringing. First call, Vincent's roommate. Vincent never came home from the library. Second call, Anthony's girlfriend. Hysterical. Anthony left my apartment last night. His car is still in the parking lot. He never made it home. Third call, Joseph's latest fling. Joseph left the club hours ago. Nobody's seen him. Anastasia hung up the phone. Sat at his desk. 3 nephews, all missing. Same night. This wasn't coincidence. He called his underboss. Find them. Now. Every man we have. Search every hospital, every police station, every... The doorbell rang. A courier, delivering an envelope. No return address. Inside, a simple note. Typed, untraceable. We should talk about fair trade. One of yours for 3 of mine seems reasonable. Call this number when you're ready to be rational. BJ, a phone number below the message. Anastasia crumpled the note. His face went red, then white. Bumpy Johnson. The rage came first. Pure murderous fury. How dare this street hustler kidnap his family, his nephews, boys he'd known since they were children? Anastasia wanted to mobilize every soldier he had, wanted to burn Harlem to the ground, wanted to make Bumpy Johnson suffer in ways that would make murder, Inca's greatest hits, look merciful. But then reality set in. He couldn't go to the police. He was a wanted criminal. The FBI had files on him 3 inches thick. Going to the cops meant exposure he couldn't afford. He couldn't launch an open war on Harlem, because that meant the nephews might die. And even if they didn't, the casualties would be massive on both sides, and other families would see weakness, would see that someone had hurt his family and gotten away with it. He couldn't ask the commission, the ruling body of the 5 families, for help, because that meant admitting he'd been outmaneuvered, that he'd started something he couldn't finish, that he'd put his own family at risk through arrogance. He couldn't even pay a ransom. Because Bumpy wasn't asking for money, he was asking for respect, and admitting you'd pay for that was worse than paying. Albert Anastasia, the Lord High Executioner, the man who'd killed hundreds without remorse, was trapped. Trapped by the one thing he'd never expected to be weaponized against him: love for his family. He sent emissaries to Harlem, 5 different intermediaries over the next 12 hours. Each one came back with the same message. Mr. Johnson says he'll only speak to you directly. He says you have his phone number. Each refusal to call personally made Anastasia look weaker. Each hour that passed, the story spread. Other families heard, the streets heard. Albert Anastasia had been put in check, and he didn't know how to get out. By the evening of June 13th, 24 hours after the nephews were taken, Anastasia was getting calls from other mob bosses. You need help, Albert? Translation: you look weak. Can you handle this? I got it under control, Anastasia said through gritted teeth. But he didn't, and everyone knew it. For 36 hours, Albert Anastasia refused to call. Meanwhile, Bumpy was teaching 3 mafia nephews about respect. The safe house was in Harlem, a brownstone, comfortable. 3 separate apartments in the same building. Each nephew in their own space, each with 2 guards rotating shifts. This wasn't a dungeon, wasn't a warehouse, wasn't a torture chamber. It was an apartment, with a bed, a bathroom, a radio, books, food. The nephews were terrified at first. They knew who their uncle was, knew what he did to people who crossed him. Assumed they'd be killed as revenge, but nobody hurt them. They were fed 3 times a day. Good food, the kind their mothers made. The guards were professional, but not cruel. Asked if they needed anything, brought newspapers, answered questions. When's this gonna be over? Joseph asked on the 2nd day. When your uncle makes a phone call, one guard said. Should have been over already, but he's too proud to call. So you sit here until he gets past his ego. Vincent, the law student, was the smartest. You're not going to kill us. Why would we? The guard asked. You didn't do anything wrong. Your uncle did. This is between him and Mr. Johnson. So why take us? Because it's the only thing your uncle actually cares about. You can kill his men. He replaces them. Take his money. He makes more. But his family, that's different. That's real to him. On the 2nd afternoon, Bumpy Johnson himself visited. All 3 nephews were brought to the main apartment. They sat on a couch. Bumpy sat across from them in a chair. No weapons visible, just a conversation. I imagine you're angry, Bumpy said. You kidnapped us, Vincent said. Yeah, we're angry. Your uncle kidnapped one of my men first. Does that make you angry? Silence. I didn't think so. Because that's how your uncle does business. He takes what he wants, uses violence, intimidation, fear. And you three, you're being groomed to do the same thing someday. Continue the family business. Anthony spoke up. Our uncle is a powerful man. He's going to call me and negotiate, Bumpy interrupted gently, because that's how this works. He took something from me. I took something from him. Now we talk like reasonable people. He's not going to negotiate with you, Joseph said. He will, because he loves you. And that's the difference between your uncle and me. He uses fear to control people, but he can be controlled through love. Me? I'm the opposite. My community loves me because I protect them. But I'm not vulnerable through love. I'm strong because of it. Vincent was watching Bumpy carefully. You're making a point. I'm teaching a lesson, Bumpy said. Your uncle thought Harlem was weak because we don't have hundreds of soldiers, because we don't kill indiscriminately, because we're black men in a white man's mafia world. But strength isn't about violence. It's about intelligence, about knowing your enemy's weaknesses, about being 3 moves ahead. He stood up. You boys will go home soon, unharmed. Probably with a better understanding of how power actually works. And maybe when you're running things someday, you'll remember this. That real power isn't about how many people fear you. It's about how many people would go to war for you willingly. Bumpy left. The 3 nephews sat in silence. Vincent finally spoke. He's right, you know, about Uncle Albert, about the fear. Shut up, Anthony said, but his voice lacked conviction. Joseph was crying. I just want to go home. Me too, Vincent said quietly. But I think I learned something. Every day, photos were sent to Anastasia, his nephews, safe, unharmed, but in Harlem, in the enemy's territory, eating at Bumpy's table, breathing Harlem's air. The psychological torture was perfect. Anastasia knew they were alive, but he had no control. None. 48 hours after the kidnapping, Albert Anastasia finally broke, and what he said on that phone call would become legend in the underworld. Stop for a second. Imagine being the most feared man in American organized crime, the man who decides who lives and dies, the man who's killed hundreds, and now you have to pick up a phone and beg someone you tried to intimidate, someone you thought was beneath you. Could you make that call? Drop your answer in the comments below. Because what happened next defined Bumpy Johnson's legend, June 14th, 1955. 9:47 p.m., Albert Anastasia sat in his study, alone. The phone number was written on a piece of paper in front of him. He'd been staring at it for an hour. Behind him, the noose on the wall, his trophy, his symbol, now felt like mockery. He picked up the phone, dialed. Bumpy Johnson answered on the second ring. Mr. Anastasia, I was wondering when you'd call. The voice was calm, patient, almost friendly. That made it worse somehow. You have my nephews, Anastasia said. He tried to sound commanding, powerful, but his voice shook slightly. I do, just like you, have my man. Fair trade, wouldn't you say? This is not how we do business. Really, because taking someone against their will and demanding compliance through fear is exactly how you do business. I'm just applying your methods to you. Anastasia's hand tightened on the receiver. What do you want? My man, alive and unharmed, returned to Harlem with an apology. An apology? You came into my territory. You took my man. You demanded tribute. You acted like Harlem was yours to exploit. So yes, an apology, an acknowledgement that you were wrong. And if I refuse? There was a pause. Then Bumpy spoke, and his voice had changed, colder now. Then your nephews stay in Harlem, indefinitely. They're comfortable, safe, but you never see them again. And everyone in the underworld knows that Albert Anastasia lost his family because he was too proud to admit a mistake. You wouldn't dare. Mr. Anastasia, I've already dared. They're in Harlem right now, have been for 2 days, and you couldn't find them, couldn't touch them, couldn't do anything about it. So let's not pretend you have leverage here. Silence on the line. Anastasia tried a different approach. Name your price. Money, territory, heroin roads, whatever you want. I don't want your money. Then what? Respect. That's all I ever wanted. You come into Harlem, you treat us like equals. You want to do business? We negotiate like partners. You don't take, you ask. And if we say no, you accept it. The commission won't. The commission doesn't need to know. This is between us. You return Smooth. I return your nephews. And from this day forward, you treat Harlem as independent territory, not part of your operations, not subject to your demands. Independent. More silence. And if I agree to this, my nephews are safe? They're safe right now. They've been safe the whole time. I'm not a monster, Mr. Anastasia. I don't hurt innocent people to make a point. That's your method, not mine. Bumpy let that sit for a moment, then continued. But I need you to understand something. What you're feeling right now, the helplessness, the fear for your family, the rage at being out of control, this is what you do to people every day. You terrorize families. You take fathers and sons and brothers. You hurt people to maintain power. I do what's necessary. No. You do what's easy. Violence is easy. Fear is easy. Building real power, the kind people respect instead of just obey, that's hard. And you're not capable of it. That's why you're on this phone right now, negotiating with someone you thought you could just intimidate. Another pause. So here's what happens next, Bumpy said. Tomorrow morning, 10:01 a.m., neutral location. You bring Smooth, I bring your nephews. We make the exchange. You go back to Brooklyn. I stay in Harlem. And this never happens again. How do I know you'll keep your word? Because I've already kept it. Your nephews have been treated with respect, fed well, kept safe. I've done everything I said I would. Can you say the same about how you've treated Smooth? Anastasia couldn't answer that. Smooth had been roughed up, not tortured, but scared, treated like property. I was wrong, Anastasia said finally. The words tasted like poison. It won't happen again. See? That wasn't so hard. Bumpy's voice had warmth now, not mockery, genuine respect. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., I'll have someone contact you with the location. Bumpy? Yes? If you ever cross me again, I won't need to, because you're never going to give me a reason to. Are you, Mr. Anastasia? The Lord High Executioner had no answer. Good night, Albert, Bumpy said. The line went dead. Anastasia sat there for a long time, the phone still in his hand, the noose on the wall mocking him. He'd just been checkmated by a Harlem gangster. And the worst part was, he couldn't even be angry about it, because Bumpy had been right about everything. The exchange would happen the next morning, but the real damage was already done. Albert Anastasia had been broken, and everyone would know it. June 15th, 1955, 10 a.m., Grand Central Terminal, main concourse, a public location, neutral ground, hundreds of civilians around. No way either side would start shooting. Bumpy Johnson arrived with 5 men. Smooth Henderson was with them, alive, a bit bruised, but okay. The 3 nephews walked beside Bumpy. They looked different somehow, less arrogant, more aware. Albert Anastasia arrived with 10 men. He wanted the show of force, needed to look powerful even in defeat. The 2 groups met in the center of the concourse. Commuters flowed around them. Nobody knew they were watching history. Anastasia saw his nephews first. His face broke, just for a moment. Relief, fear, love. Then the mask came back, the Lord High Executioner. Uncle Albert, Vincent said. His voice was different too, less reverent, more measured. Anastasia grabbed all 3 nephews, checked them for injuries. They were fine, exactly as Bumpy had promised. Smooth walked forward to Bumpy's side. Boss, I'm good. They roughed me up, but I'm okay. Bumpy nodded, put a hand on Smooth's shoulder. Good to have you back. Then Bumpy looked at Anastasia. The 2 men made eye contact for the first time. Bumpy Johnson and Albert Anastasia, face to face. Your nephews are good kids, Bumpy said. Smart, especially Vincent. You should be proud. Anastasia's jaw tightened. This doesn't mean we're friends. It means you respect Harlem now. That's all I ever wanted. There was something in Anastasia's eyes. Anger, yes, but also something else. Acknowledgement. A nonverbal admission that Bumpy had won, that the lesson had been learned. It won't happen again, Anastasia said. I know. Both groups left, separately. No more words needed. On the train back to Harlem, Smooth debriefed Bumpy. They kept me in a warehouse. Couple of guards. Threatened me some, but didn't really hurt me. I think Anastasia was waiting to see if you'd fold first. But he folded instead, Chess Monroe said, smiling. What made him break? Smooth asked. Family, Bumpy said simply. The one thing he actually loved more than power. You think he'll come after us later? No, because if he does, everyone will know he broke his word. And in his world, that's worse than death. Word spread through the mob families within hours. Albert Anastasia had negotiated with Bumpy Johnson, had traded evenly, one man for three, had publicly acknowledged Harlem as off-limits. The Lord High Executioner had been humbled. Some bosses laughed. Some respected the move. All of them took note. Bumpy Johnson wasn't just smart. He was dangerous in ways that didn't involve bullets. June through December 1955. The ripple effects. No more kidnappings in Harlem. No more demands for tribute from Italian families. No more attempts to muscle in on the numbers racket or heroin trade. Anastasia never spoke about the incident publicly, but privately to the commission, he acknowledged that Harlem was independent territory, not to be touched. Other families adjusted their behavior accordingly. When they wanted to do business in Harlem, they asked first, negotiated, treated Bumpy as an equal. For the first time in the history of New York organized crime, a black gangster was invited to sit in on certain commission meetings. Not as a member, Italian mafia was still racist, but as a recognized power, a voice that mattered, that had never happened before. And it happened because Bumpy Johnson taught the most feared man in America that intelligence beats violence. The three nephews went home, but they were changed. Vincent finished law school, graduated top of his class, became the family's legitimate lawyer, and when he dealt with Harlem interests, he was always fair, always professional. He never forgot his 2 days in that brownstone, never forgot what Bumpy taught him about real power. Years later, when Vincent was an old man, a reporter asked him about Albert Anastasia, about growing up in that world. There was one time, Vincent said carefully, when I learned that fear and respect are not the same thing. My uncle ruled through fear. He was powerful, but another man I met, I won't say his name, he ruled through respect, and I realized which one I wanted to be. Anthony rose in the family business, but he never had his uncle's appetite for violence. He focused on legitimate operations, treated people fairly. Some said those 2 days in Harlem had softened him, made him question the family's methods. Joseph matured significantly, stopped drinking so much, stopped being a playboy, got serious about life. His brothers joked that being kidnapped by Bumpy Johnson was the best thing that ever happened to him. All three nephews, forever marked by the experience, not traumatized, educated. As for Albert Anastasia, the story has a darker ending. October 25th, 1957, 2.5 years after the phone call with Bumpy. Anastasia walked into the barbershop at the Park Sheraton Hotel in Manhattan. 10:15 a.m., his usual time, his usual chair. He sat down. The barber put the cloth around his neck, started to lather his face for a shave. Two men walked in, wearing scarves over their faces, carrying revolvers. They shot Albert Anastasia 10 times, in the face, in the chest, in the back as he tried to stand. The Lord High Executioner died in a barber chair, the most feared man in American organized crime, killed by unknown gunmen who were never caught. The official story, it was a mob hit, ordered by rivals. Vito Genovese wanted control of the family. Carlo Gambino wanted to rise. Anastasia had made too many enemies, but there was an unofficial story too, one that circulated in the underworld quietly. Albert Anastasia never recovered from the Bumpy Johnson incident, that phone call where he had to beg, that public exchange at Grand Central, the humiliation of being outplayed, It showed weakness. And in the mob, weakness gets you killed. His rivals saw that he could be broken, that his reputation was more fragile than they thought, that he wasn't untouchable, and so they touched him. With 10 bullets in a barbershop. Bumpy Johnson, meanwhile, lived until 1968, died of a heart attack at age 62. In his sleep, surrounded by people who loved him, he killed people in his life, made hard choices, did illegal things. He was not a saint, but he proved something that echoed through organized crime for decades after. Intelligence beats violence, strategy beats fear, and real power, the kind that lasts, comes from respect, not terror. Albert Anastasia never learned that lesson, and it cost him everything. Here's the lesson that matters beyond the story of two gangsters. Albert Anastasia killed hundreds of people, literally hundreds. He was called the Lord High Executioner, the most feared man in American organized crime. He died alone, shot in a barber chair, killed by his own people. His legacy is violence and terror. His name is remembered, but not with respect, with fear, with revulsion. Bumpy Johnson killed people too. Fewer, but strategically, only when necessary. He died in his bed, of natural causes, at age 62. His funeral had thousands of people who genuinely mourned. His legacy is intelligence and community protection. His name is remembered with respect. The difference? One man thought power came from making people afraid. The other understood that real power comes from making people believe in you. When you lead through fear, you're only powerful as long as people are afraid. The moment you show weakness, like Anastasia did with Bumpy, your power evaporates. Because fear has no loyalty. When you lead through respect, your power grows. Even when you're not the strongest. Even when you don't have the most soldiers. Because respect creates loyalty. And loyalty is permanent. So here's my question. Could you have matched Anastasia's move the way Bumpy did? Could you have taken his nephews, treated them with respect, and forced him to call you? Could you have won without violence? Drop your answer in the comments below. And tell me where in the world you're watching this from. New York, London, Tokyo, Lagos, São Paulo? I love seeing how far these stories reach. If you made it this far, hit that subscribe button, because I'm bringing you more stories of strategic genius, the intelligence that beat violence, the calculated moves that change history, the lessons about real power. These are the untold stories of organized crime, not just the violence, but the brilliance behind it. Until next time, remember, intelligence always beats violence, strategy always beats fear, and real power comes from respect, not terror.